Hello, hello.
Hi,
I'm Kris,
and I'm Alice.
and you're listening to Xena Made Me Gay.
In the times of brick phones, Tamagotchis, and curtain bangs, the 90s kids cried out for a badass. She was Xena, the warrior princess. The kicks, the moves, the nostalgia, the queerness. Xena made us gay.
Welcome, welcome.
Woohoo!
Yeah. So,
Exciting.
it is. So, today we are going to be talking about episode 13 of season 1 called, this is quite a mouthful, Athens City Academy of the Performing Bards. Just rolls off the tongue.
Yeah. It's a mouthful, but it's a great title. But before we dive into my undying love for this episode,
Okay.
I just listened to a bunch of holiday podcasts, and one of them was rating the storylines in the movie Love Actually. So I don't think that we quite there yet, so we can like rate the storylines. But I was thinking that we know the recurring characters, like apart from Xena and Gabrielle, that are in the series, and like some of them get more screen time, some of them get less screen time, and like some of them have not appeared yet in the point of the show that we're now,
Hmm.
but I'm sure that most of the listeners know about them. So
Hmm.
I would want us to kind of like do this fun exercise and rate the 10 characters. I only have 9, but there's a space for one more for you to add with us because I'm sure I forgot someone,
Uh-huh.
from least important to most important to the story. And that I want to emphasize that it's not going to be our favorite characters, because that's then you know who my favorite is. But just
Yeah.
just in terms of how much do they influence the story, how important like as characters, how important they are,
Hmm.
and yeah. So in my list I have Autolycus, Hercules,
Hmm.
boo, Salmonius that we just saw, Joxer that we're about to see,
Hmm.
Callisto that also we're about to see, Xena's mom, who has a name but I forgot it, Ares, Caesar, Solon.
So, in terms of this 10th person, I have two
Mhm.
suggestions. Suggestion number
Okay.
1 is Aphrodite,
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
she appears quite a few times. And
Yes.
suggestion number 2 is Gabrielle's demon baby.
Oh God. Yeah, let's stick with Aphrodite to not bum ourselves out.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so in terms of the list, we agreed which characters are going to be on the list with Kris, and then we separately ranked them from least important to most important. And here are our rankings. Okay, so in the 10th place, we have Salmonius, who I love dearly, but he is there more for comic relief, and he does not contribute that much to the story. So that's why for me he's number 10. Number 9, we have Solon, and that's an interesting choice because like he is very important to Xena, but we don't see a lot of him from the moment he's introduced to the moment he's dead. So technically he's important as a plot point, but he's not important as a character. Um 8, Xena's mom, I agree. We don't see a lot of her, and like she's not that important to the whole storyline, and she's underdeveloped as a character, I would say. 7, I think Aphrodite, and she's up there because like although she does not appear a lot, I'm not gonna get into that because I would have to retell the whole story of the last season. But I think that in the last season she plays a pretty crucial role,
Mm.
so I kind of want to keep her up there because of that. 6 is Caesar, and
Wow.
you thought he would be number one.
I mean, definitely not number 6. Wow.
Yeah, again, I love this character. I love this actor, but like he's important because he's part of the origin story, and he keeps reoccurring as this arch nemesis. But yeah, he's not that important, so I would put him higher up, and there are more important characters. Fifth is Autolycus. He is not crucial to the overall storytelling, but he appears a lot, and it seems like if we would ask ourselves who is the best friend of Gabrielle and Xena, I would say Autolycus kind of is like up there on the
Yeah.
list. Right?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Um, he's buddies with them, and like we could see that both Gabrielle and Xena separately have this nice friendship with him eventually.
Hmm.
So he's important. Hercules is number 4. He's also part of the origin stories. Moving on. Joxer is number 3, and like in terms of screen time, he would be number 1. But I
Yeah.
think that in terms of the role he plays, yeah, he's important, but not the most important.
Mhm.
Eris is number 2, um, because yeah, he's like they have a very complex relationship with Xena, and at some point start having a very complex relationship with Gabrielle. So he's like an important heterosexual dude in their lives. And I would say that number 1 is Callisto,
Hmm.
who throughout the story the writers kept thinking of ways to write her in and make her important. And again, my theory is that they were so fond of the actress.
Aw.
But anyway, she really did a great job, and it's an interesting character that has a lot of twists and turns throughout the story.
Cool. So,
You go now.
yes, yes, let me do mine. So, in terms of number 10, I have Xena's mom. The fact that I
Mhm.
don't remember a single episode that she's in aside from the first one um,
Mhm.
made me put her there because everyone else, I remember them actually being recurring characters. Like even if she does appear in some other episodes, I can't recall that. So Zeta's mom goes into the last place.
Mhm.
Then number 9 is Salmonius. I love him. But
Mhm.
yeah, when he appeared in that recent episode, I was like, oh yeah, like we're gonna see a lot of him. And then I looked up the actor's IMDb page, and it was just like I think 3 or 4 episodes total in the whole series. And I guess I saw him so much in Hercules that I was like, oh yeah, that's my
Mhm.
buddy Solomonius. Like I see him all the time. But actually, in specifically in the Xena universe, he doesn't play that larger role. Um, I
Yeah.
don't remember the last season of Xena that well, which is why Aphrodite is in the 8th place. I know that you said that she plays an important role. At that point, I don't remember it, which is why
Fair.
she's number 8 for me. Then number 7 is Solon again. I remember him popping up and dying very quickly.
Yeah.
And that is kind of it. you know so I can't put him higher than that.
Mhm.
um I put Joxer in the 6th place, so a
Uh-huh.
lot lower than you, because yeah, even though we see him a lot, I feel like just in terms of story progression and character development, I don't think he contributes as much. He's just there to be
Yeah.
a comic relief character and sing stupid songs and uh, be related to one of the creators.
Apparently also attract child audience
Yeah,
because you said that you really liked him.
as a child, as like a 5, 6 year old, I fucking loved him. He was my guy. Um, and look, maybe as he appears in over the course of us reviewing these episodes, I will, I don't know, have a more nuanced take. But so far, my journey with Joxer was uh, love the guy as a tiny, tiny human. Uh, I'm really annoyed by the guy in my 20s, and
Yeah.
to be determined um, as a 30-year-old. Um,
Yeah.
in the fifth spot, I've got Hercules. So important in Xena's origin story, and he does appear, I don't know, once or twice in the series itself. Um,
More than we would want to.
for sure, for sure. Um, but overall, there are more important characters. Then I have Autolycus as number 4. So
Hmm.
appears quite a lot. Is, I think you described him really aptly as probably Xena and Gabrielle's best friend. And
Hmm.
yeah, I would say his contributions are important enough for me to place him fairly highly. Then I
Yeah.
have Caesar. So it's funny that
Wow. Yeah.
yeah, I'm the one placing Caesar higher up. Um,
I'm curious to know why.
I don't know. I feel like he is important in terms of our understanding of who Xena is and why she is the way that
Hmm.
she is, and kind of what uh, demons from her past she's battling. And
Yeah.
he's a very good representation of that. Um, but definitely part of the reason I'm placing him this highly is that you have your propaganda, your Caesar propaganda has worked. Okay, you have been
Aw.
successful. You have brainwashed me into thinking that Caesar is important. I hope you're proud of yourself.
I really am. But actually, now I tend to agree with you more in terms of placing him high up on the list because I remembered that also it's going to be way into the series. I think also season 6 or
Mm.
something that Xena and Gabrielle kind of have this alternate lives. Like,
Yes.
how would they live? And like Xena's alternative storyline is being married to Caesar.
Yeah. Right.
So
Right.
yeah,
Right.
that's interesting.
Oh, I remember that episode.
Yeah.
Yes, and my top two are reversed in terms of
Hmm.
where you place them. So I have Callisto as number 2 and Ares as number 1. Again, because I don't remember that much about what they did with Callisto beyond like her initial role. I totally believe
Hmm.
you that that they like kept bringing her back, and then she kept playing different kinds of roles, but it's just that's not the memory that I have of her as a character. But obviously,
Hmm.
important, appears a lot. That's totally fair. And yeah, Ares is my number 1 because again, I feel like he's so formative in terms of who Xena is, how did she become herself, what she had to like push against as she changed her life.
Hmm.
So that's why he's number 1. And also, have you seen that
That's
belt? That belt already propels him to the
that
top.
belt, that vest. That's true.
That
Yeah,
facial
but
hair.
also that facial, the shape of the facial hair
Oh
that
yeah.
changes
Oh
constantly.
yeah. Oh yeah.
Uh, but also, really, I love this character because he also could be just this monster that we keep coming back to. That was important in Xena's past, but
Mhm.
it's cool that he has his own character, his own storyline, his own development as a character.
Mhm.
Like the Ares that we see in season 1 and in season 6 are like they're like totally different. So yeah,
But
I
not
agree
totally
that he's
different in a way that's like, oh no, y'all didn't have any idea about what you were doing.
no, definitely. And like
He
he does
progresses.
not develop yeah, he does not develop a new personality. He does not like become a goody two shoes all of a sudden,
Mm-mm.
but he does progress as a
Yeah.
character, and that's why we love him.
Aw. All right. So that's our ranking. I'm sure some of you disagree. So let us know if you have
Yeah.
your own version of this.
Yes, by the way, we're going to post our ranking on our Insta at Xena Made Me Gay. You should follow our Insta because I know that we don't have a lot of listeners, but some of you have been asking, like, where can you follow us on social media? And by some of you, I mean one. So for that one person, first of all, thank you so much for the rating on Apple Podcasts. We appreciate it so much, and thank you for listening. And please subscribe to our Insta because we do announce the new episodes there. Okay,
Awesome.
shameless plug time over.
Yeah, yeah. Look, we've recorded 13 episodes without mentioning it, so I feel like, if anything, it was kind of overdue.
So, shall we go to the
Yeah,
episode?
on to the episode. So we open with no, we don't. We're straight in. We don't open with anything. It's already happening by the time we tune in. It's the middle of a fight scene, and it's Xena against a bunch of guys, and she's kicking and punching and jumping around and screaming, and it's all happening when record scratch. We're in a tavern somewhere, and some old man is complaining to Gabrielle about a continuity error in her story. See,
Yeah.
it's dark during the fight scene, but it shouldn't be. The story started in the morning, so it must be day now. Gabrielle
Hmm.
doesn't appreciate being interrupted.
Yeah, yeah. I love how Gabby continues the story almost like she's this ambitious theater playwright during a table read. She like lifts her arms in the air and she says, "Day," and then continues to tell the story. It's so dramatic.
Yeah. Okay, so as we find out immediately, this is the first kind of meta-ish episode of Xena that we get, and as the series progresses and the writers' room gets a bit tired, possibly a bit more drunk.
And high.
Yes.
At some in some episodes, definitely.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, allegedly, we did not have any confirmation that this happened.
Allegedly,
Yes, yes,
yes.
yes.
We say it with love.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And so, as the writers' room kind of goes through different states of consciousness, these kinds of episodes are going to be happening more and more. And so, here clearly Gabrielle is acting as kind of a stand-in for those writers who are, seems like, self-aware enough to know that they too probably will be, or maybe already have at this point, been called out for continuity errors themselves.
Yes, definitely. And look, I love meta episodes. I think when we discussed it at the very beginning, I said that those are one of my favorites, and this one is done particularly well. So I'm very excited for this one.
Yeah, I did not experience this episode in the same way. So
Okay,
it'd be
okay, interesting.
interesting as we continue discussing it.
Hmm.
Anyway, Gabrielle quickly adjusts the story, as you said, to happen in the daytime,
Hmm.
and we find out that we actually already know this story. It's episode 6, The Reckoning, featuring our friend Fax Machine Face Guy. For those that don't get the reference, you can go back and listen to our episode on episode 6.
Hmm.
So we do kind of a speed run through a few key scenes of that episode with Gabrielle narrating the plot, minus the Ares storyline. and
Hmm.
the audience really loves it.
Yeah, yeah. I'm curious if Gabby actually told the audience what happened and how Ares was involved, because in the episode itself, episode 6 of Xena Warrior Princess, Gabrielle was kept completely in the dark of what was going on, and everybody else also. And just at the end, we have those people brought back from the dead, like, surprise, hello. So I wonder how that is explained in Gabrielle's story.
Well, at the very end of that episode, Xena starts telling Gabrielle about Ares, so I think she kind of filled her in at that point.
Yes, yes, hopefully she did. And I think since those are the times, if Gabrielle would just say, and then the god of war, Ares, appeared and did this and this and this, they would be like, oh, okay, sure. I mean, that happens. So I really find charming when Gabrielle retells those stories from the past episodes. But I wonder if that's a choice or just they did sort of a crappy job with it. But every time she retells things, she's very cheesy and commercial. Like, she's not a good writer. But on the other
No.
hand, maybe she just really has like this commercial success in like telling those really straight to the point, uncomplicated stories, because she's getting tipped well in this tavern when she finishes the story. And I assume that that might be their family income with Xena, because Xena does not get paid for her adventures. She usually
Mm.
helps the common folk and does not take any money from them. So maybe the money comes from Gabrielle being a storyteller.
Oh, yeah. That's a good point. Interesting. But yeah, I
Mhm.
I agree that so the episode wants us to think that Gabrielle is amazing at storytelling, but everything that we actually see
And
and
here, yeah.
hear indicates the exact opposite. Which is,
Yep.
yeah, as we'll keep discussing, the episode is kind of one of the reasons it really didn't work for me. It just kept
Okay.
distracting me. The fact that
Hmm.
the reality that the plot demands is so not in sync with what we're being shown.
Yeah, definitely.
Um, so as everyone is congratulating Gabrielle on being so amazing at storytelling, uh, we see a cute little twink come up to Gabrielle and compliment her also. And he
Hmm.
asks her where she trained and whether she's going to be taking part in the upcoming bard competition at the Athens City Academy of the Performing Bards. And this actually marks the fourth episode in a row where the title of the episode is actually said by someone in it.
Here, I also, coming back to the title, I also like that Athens Academy of the Performing Bards is definitely a hint of Athens, or like any Academy of the Performing Arts. I guess a bard is kind of like a mix between a writer and an actor, because you have to tell
Mm.
that story. So um, we're going to see the reality of Juilliard kids in this episode, and that's what I really like.
Aw. So if that twink looks kind of familiar to you, it might be that you've actually seen that actor playing one of the hobbits in that soulless hobbit trilogy that some of us suffered through. The twink says that the top 4 contestants would get the invitation to study at the academy. And Gabrielle asks him whether he also tells stories, but before the twink opens his mouth, his daddy steps up.
Sorry. Okay.
But before the twink opens his mouth, his daddy steps up and answers for him that yes, the twink tells stories, but no, he doesn't have time to do it now. The twink protests
Mhm.
and tells his daddy that Gabrielle was great, which the daddy immediately dismisses, saying that he's sure that the story was cute. But the academy
Mhm.
is for talented people and not people who know how to buy shoes. I mean, not for witty people who would bore everyone with stories about housework. On that note, the daddy takes the twink away, leaving Gabrielle in a mixed state of outrage and perplexion, which must be extremely familiar to many women.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, it was masterfully done how he insults her with this comments about housework. And I really enjoy how Gabby is fuming when someone is insulting her craft. So I would imagine she would be fuming if she listened to this episode. Sorry, Gabrielle.
Yeah, sorry, not sorry. So Xena walks in almost immediately after that, bringing news about a cyclops that steals cattle in some nearby village, telling Gabrielle that they can be there the next morning. And Xena is sure that Gabrielle is on board, but Gabrielle pauses for a while and is like, how far is it to Athens?
I really like the comedy music that is playing on the background here, like da 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 da. Like we're about to see a funny episode. But also, I feel bad for Xena
Mm.
in this scene because she is so excited about Cyclops stealing cattle from the village. Yay! And she finally kind of came to terms with Gabrielle being around and not trying to, in her usual fashion, to get rid of her.
Aw.
And now it's like, oh, yeah, I felt sad for her there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's gonna get even sadder in a moment because
Yeah.
because after the intro, Gabrielle explains to Xena how it's a super rare opportunity to study at the academy and how she wants to pursue this dream of hers. And Xena is
Hmm.
genuinely encouraging, but there's clearly quite a lot of sadness in that encouragement already as she,
Hmm.
asks Gabrielle about how long she would be away, how long it takes to complete the studies. So Gabrielle says it would be 4 or 5 years, but that Xena would
Hmm.
hardly even notice her absence.
Hmm.
um, and so Xena smiles and says that even if she had an army around her, she would still notice her absence. Oh, it's it's a
Yeah.
very very tender moment, and I think that it's a moment that is pretty much impossible to mistake for anything but love. It's just so
Yeah. Definitely.
palpable at that time, and it's almost time for the holidays right now, and there's this infamous incest Folgers commercial making the rounds. Bear with me, bear with me. I'm gonna like make it make sense.
Uh-huh.
I
Uh-huh.
just
Uh-huh.
I feel like the commercial kind of is a good illustration of how you can infuse something in a scene even if like the script doesn't necessarily give you everything, or doesn't like have as much explicit text in it that would be like, oh wow,
Mhm.
that's a love story there. And I feel like, yeah, in this incest Folgers commercial, and in this scene with Gabrielle and Xena, they're just so much subtext, and I feel like, yeah, with Xena and Gabrielle, almost more, that you can feel that this is the place that the situation is coming from.
Definitely, yeah. We would have to post a link to the Folgers commercial that we mentioned so much on our Instagram so people would see it. It really is iconic. I'm sure that most people saw it. But coming back to Xena and Gabrielle and their love story, it's interesting to me in terms of witnessing their relationship happening on screen because for me, that's the beauty of the first season. We kind of
Mm.
see the story happening and at some point it is established and then it's just like the development of their relationship. So here, Xena is pretty much confessing her love, not
Mm.
in a straightforward way,
Yeah.
but basically we can feel it.
Mm.
And it's interesting because given how enthusiastic Gabrielle was at the very beginning to travel with Xena and how in awe she was when she saw her, I kind
Mm.
of thought that Gabrielle falls in love first,
Mm.
but here it kind of seems that Xena is the one who, at least who realizes that those feelings are the feelings of love. But on the other hand, Xena has more experience with lesbian love. Like, we definitely assume that there has been something with Lao Ma in her past, maybe other women too.
Mm.
And Gabrielle is like fresh and new to all of this, so she might already feel those feels but doesn't recognize them,
Yeah,
maybe.
yeah, which I'm sure a lot of our listeners would also be familiar with.
Been there, yeah.
So there's this really tender moment, and it continues. It like keeps building up because Xena offers to accompany Gabrielle to Athens, and she says that she herself actually knows a story. And it's a story about two orphans who go on a journey to find their families, only to find out that they were each other's family all along. And Gabrielle knows the story and even finishes it in unison with Xena. Uh,
Mhm.
Xena thanks Gabrielle for being her family and says that Gabrielle is like a sister to her, which
Mhm.
makes me even gladder that I brought up the fucking Folgers commercial. Because that's exactly the kind of sisterhood we're talking about here.
Yep.
Yeah, anyway, by the end of the conversation, both Dina and Gabrielle are tearing up. Then we get a scene that immediately looks kind of off. It looks like a cheap Peplum movie. It doesn't look like it's from Xena. There's some
Mhm.
Roman soldiers standing around, and they're about to take out their swords, but then we hear that the narrator stutters, and we see
Mhm.
the soldiers kind of follow that stuttering as their swords go in and out, as if someone's rewinding and replaying the tape over and over. And
Yeah.
we then see our narrator sitting next to the twink, and the narrator is worrying that his stutter would ruin his chances at the competition.
Yeah, it's one of those artistic choices that I adore about this episode, and I think that that's why it's one of my favorite. I really like when they're playing with those um, cutouts from old movies, and I assume that they are real old movies, like, that they used for this thing, like old peplums, like little snippets of them. And especially since there's not much action going on in this episode, and it's very, very hard to make storytelling exciting, like those competitions between people just like saying words, they're basically talking heads. So I think that this choice of actually showing the style of every single wannabe bard of the academy performance, to kind of like have it give them their own style of peplum movie, or in Gabrielle's case, like episode of Xena Warrior Princess, to illustrate their abilities. Yeah, I find it charming, and that's why I love this episode, basically.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's fair, and that part is indeed well done. So the twink then notices Gabrielle, who has also arrived to compete, and together they look around at the other bards.
Yeah, yeah, that's also one of my favorite parts, because they look around at the other bards and we see them telling their stories and like the words that they use and how they look. So one of the bards that is introduced is Euripides, who's like a real playwright, an author of Medea and Iphigenia in Taurus. And I had to read a lot of his stuff when I was getting my journalism degree
Oh.
in the university. And I would say that, yes, they portrayed him accurately. Like, he's this pretentious, sort of douchey character who always speaks in cryptic verse, which fair. I would say that's a fair betrayal.
Aw.
And then the other thing that I maybe like even more is like we see another bard who's like, and then this guy hit him, and this guy hit him again. And like, his name is Stallonus. Who, as I understand, he's like the ancient Greek blockbuster author, which is absolutely priceless.
But this one is not real, right?
Stallonus.
I don't know.
No.
Okay.
Sorry.
Well,
No, I
you like made it sound like they're all real because you were talking about fewer people.
yes. Yes, sorry. I like how they also mix the real ones and the made up ones, and I assume that Stallone's is just like a hint to Sylvester Stallone. That's why I say that maybe he could be even dressed in furs, but that's reserved for the Barbie movie much later.
The Barbie movie much later.
Because Ken being dressed in this fur coat was heavily inspired by Sly Stallone and his style, like when he was dressing in coats. So
Really?
yeah, yeah, definitely. That's a snippet that I think Greta even talking about. So, and I think that when coming back to Barbie movie, when Ken is in this center, like where does he go? Like some business center, and he sees Sylvester Stallone in a coat on the
Oh,
screen,
that's
and then, right,
right. Of
right,
course. Oh, yeah.
yeah, that's where he gets the idea that like cool dudes dress like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah, so but yeah, I like this mix of real offers that is just like a breadcrumb for those who maybe like me studied them at some point, and like just a reference to pop culture. That's cool.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's something that Xena as a show enjoys playing with generally.
Mm-hmm.
So Gabrielle then talks more with the twink, and she says that she never got the chance to introduce herself, and so she does that. The twink says that he doesn't actually like his name and that he's thinking of changing it to something heroic like Draco. Gabrielle is like, no, 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 I've met Draco. He's the villain. And that kind of segues us into getting a few flashbacks to the very first episode of the series. And so I have to say that unlike the previous ones, this one does feel a bit gratuitous and kind of an excuse to
Mm-hmm.
reuse old footage.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't quite work for me here. But anyway, Gabrielle narrates Xena's fight with Draco, and by the time she finishes, we see that there's a crowd gathered around Gabrielle, enthralled by her storytelling. And again,
Yeah.
it's not very convincing. The story itself is not particularly compelling. Gabrielle doesn't necessarily give it anything special as a narrator either. But yeah.
Yeah, I think that the problem here is that we hear too much of her voice narrating the story, and
Mm,
it's not good the way
yeah.
it's written. It's like it's perfectly fine, but it's nothing that would make you gasp.
It's like
And I think like
the summary that you would read on IMDb or Wikipedia.
yeah, yeah, it's like yeah, it's informative, but it's nothing more. And like usually when they do that in TV, it's like I think as a rule, it's best to either just have the author say, and then this is what happened, and then you just
Mm,
show the video and we imagine that she's very good at retelling it,
mm,
or just do a fucking good job. What we discussed recently, the writers of the Birdcage do such a great job by
mm.
writing the comedy that Albert does. And like there are movies where performances are actually shown and they're great, but like when they're shown and they're not great and we're like just supposed to understand that they're great by the reaction of other characters, that feels very forced.
Yeah. I mean, you do know our listeners weren't present for our conversation about the birdcage yesterday, right?
Yes, okay. Yesterday we were discussing the Birdcage again.
Living our gay lives, you know?
We do discuss Birdcage a lot. Um, I wanted to say that I already mentioned it in our previous episodes, like the special one that we did.
Mm.
But yeah, in
No,
the
it wasn't that
birdcage
one.
there is no,
No,
it
no.
was,
I mean,
it
maybe you did in
was.
that one too, but you mentioned it last episode.
So I mention the birdcage every time, every chance I get. But what I was going to say, that there is a like a little snippet of a performance by Albert, who's a drag queen, and it's really fucking good. And like when
Mm.
you see it on the screen, you see a little part of it, but you're like, I would sit for that performance. I
Mm.
like it, but that's a rare thing in movies.
Yeah, for sure. So the twink asks Gabrielle for a different name suggestion since Draco is out, and she suggests Orion. And we still don't
Mhm.
find out what is the original name that the twink wants to change.
Yeah, yeah, that's coming much later.
Yes.
But yeah, in terms of Gabby's talent, I don't want to just sit here and diss on Gabrielle the whole time that we're discussing this episodes. Um, I would just I wrote here that I kind of sometimes think that she's like the Stephanie Meyer of ancient Greece. And again, sorry to all our listeners who actually love Stephanie Meyer's writing, but yeah, to me she's very commercially successful, but it's not good writing.
Mm.
But maybe that's what we're supposed to think, that like Gabrielle's writing, or should I say just like Gabrielle's storytelling, is very accessible, so
Mm.
that's why people love it.
Yeah, it could be. So we then see the bards checking in at a reception desk, I guess. The series like sprinkling in these very modern aspects of life into whatever our characters are doing. And we find out that
Hmm.
Gabrielle is not registered, but she has a plan. So her plan is she distracts the reception desk lady by tipping over a plate of scrolls and uses that moment as the lady is scrambling to pick them up from the floor to sneak in her own scroll, and that scroll says that
Hmm.
Gabrielle is participating, and Gabrielle's scroll is clearly super wrinkled and the writing there is different, but for whatever reason the reception desk lady does not seem to notice, or maybe she doesn't care that something's off. um, but because Gabrielle is not officially registered, there's no info anywhere about her lodging. So she's put up in a servant's quarter. And Gabrielle answers that all artists must suffer for their art, which is a claim.
But I also really like how the receptionist lady is portrayed. She's really authentic. She's really recognizable, a recognizable bureaucrat of the system. She's like, just leave me alone. You're here. Your name is here. Okay, whatever. Just go. I need to have my tea with biscuits.
We then see a kind of orientation event where one of the competition organizers reminds the participants about the competition rules.
Yeah, and again, I think it's done really well. The main guy is like, for the next few days, your life belongs to the muse. And I've been to several creative writing classes and groups like that, and that condescending voice that he takes on with the students, it's spot on. It's really well done. They are really like that.
However, not everything goes quite as smoothly, because as everyone is finding their seats, some guy bumps into Gabrielle in a pretty aggressive way. She's like, What's wrong with you? Like, what's happening?" So she sits
Hmm.
down, but then keeps looking at that guy, and clearly something's off about him. The twink asks Gabrielle about what is wrong, and she says that she's just thinking like a certain friend of hers, and there's nothing that can happen in an event like that. But she's wrong,
Hmm.
because right after she says that, the suspicious guy runs at the competition organizer, screaming and brandishing a knife. He stabs the man and jumps out the window. Except that it's all fake. So the man gets up and explains that they all just witnessed an event and now they need to make it into a story. And Gabrielle is not having it. She tells the not at all stabbed man that what they witnessed was actually a manipulation.
Oh.
She says that the real event would be the death of the man, because death is not necessarily the end. It can be a beginning.
As we know
And
from the Mummy.
yes, yes, I also immediately thought of the mummy. Um, but yeah, this is where we get into another flashback, and again, it feels quite gratuitous here. So we see the Death in Chains episode. I don't know. Look, clip shows are a tough genre, I think, generally,
Mhm.
and I don't know whether this one is working that well with specifically with the incorporation of those clips. Like there are good aspects in this episodes, but like the way that they work in those this old footage, I don't know. I found it a bit annoying to be honest.
I also found it annoying, but for me, it was an annoying behavior of the character rather than an annoying use of the clip. Because essentially, what happened there is that
Hmm.
the organizers of the competition wanted to stage a little thing to inspire their candidates, like a little show with the announcements. That's kind of cool. I
Hmm.
never been to a writing class where someone would come in and try to kill the writer, but I think if I had, I would be pretty excited. So that's kind of like a nice innocent idea. And then one of
Hmm.
the candidates stands up is like, actually that's all fake, because you didn't really die. Like, no shit. And then like, let me tell you what the story really is. Listen to the story I wrote least recently. Like, it's a very cringy episode, and that's like a it's cringy behavior, but I think that's just cringy behavior from Gabrielle's side,
Hmm.
which is totally her personality. She does cringy things sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, I get that. I get that. I hmm. Let me think about that. Yeah, but so Gabrielle continues being kind of a dick about this whole thing, and she finishes telling her story, tells the organizer that her story is better because his uh lacked a moral. There was no moral to his story.
Ew.
And then the audience cheers. Which is just like, what the fuck? Uh,
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, we just have to accept that everybody else, like every other character, thinks that Gabrielle is a genius,
yeah,
and we don't.
no. So outside, the twink asks Gabrielle out on a date, quote unquote, to discuss storytelling. And she agrees, but then the evil daddy again takes the twink away and tells him, keep to yourself.
I love how you keep calling him daddy. Although I never saw anything else but like the controlling father in this character, now I cannot unsee it. And I guess that's very ancient Greek of them.
So we cut to someone narrating yet another clip from a Peplum movie. So again, it's not Xena. And we see that some hero rips the chains from the wall and runs out to a plaza where a bunch of people are fighting, and then kind of swings his chains around and fights the people around him. And here Gabrielle again interrupts the narrator, who, as we can see, has gotten into this like action storytelling frenzy and was actually swinging a pillow around and bumping into
Aw.
people. So that's Stallone's. And Gabrielle is like, but what's the moral of the story? She's really getting on my nerves at this point.
That's true.
She straight up tells the guy that his story is exciting but empty. Bitch! I don't know. This sounds really harsh. I don't know. Alice, as a writer yourself, someone who has been to those types of events, I'm curious about your perspective here.
Yeah, well, in terms of ripping your fellow writer to shreds, definitely that's a reality of those writing groups.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, that's definitely happening there. Some more than others. Like, I've been accepted to one of the creative writing courses where, like, there was a poetry group which I was in, and a prose group, and as I heard, the prose group were sweethearts to one another and very
Aww.
gentle. Like, the poetry group, like, the lyrical souls were like vicious sharks, and
No.
I even heard them, like the people who were there for a second year in a row, they're like, well, that's a process. We just have to, like, destroy a person and completely convince a person that the writing is shit, and then they have a mental crisis, and then they become a better
Oh
writer.
my god. Yeah, I recognize the Russian school of education in this.
Yes, yes. That being said, if, like, anyone would ask what's the moral of the story at those classes, they would be laughed out of the room. Sorry, Gabrielle.
Yeah, oh my god. So the group continues to talk and they start talking about Xena. So it turns out that one of them actually watches Hercules. I mean, knows the story about Xena seducing Iolaus and making him fight Hercules. So we get those flashbacks as well. Um,
Mhm.
and Gabrielle admits that those stories are true, but notes that they're only half the story. And then we cut to more flashbacks, and now it's about how Xena left the Republican Party, stopped being a villain. The audience is again
Yeah.
super into it, and they want more. But Gabrielle kicks everyone out because she wants to sleep.
Yeah, and when she falls asleep, before she falls asleep, she says, I wonder what Xena is up to now, which is a nice reminder that Xena is still on her mind.
Aw. We cut to the next day, and the twink is kind of testing out his story on Gabrielle. And the ending of that story seems vaguely familiar, but we don't dwell on it at that point.
Hmm.
So Gabrielle continues to be a harsh critic of literally everyone.
Yeah.
And she tells the twink that she just couldn't see it. She asks the twink about why he keeps looking at her as he telling the story, as if it's weird. Like, why is it weird to look at the person that you're telling a story to as you're telling them? Like, that sounds normal.
And that's what Gabrielle also does, it seems, actually.
Yeah. Whatever. So because the plot demands it, of course, she asked just the right question because the twink says that the daddy told him to always pay attention to the listener's reaction and to adjust the story based on whether the listener seems bored or distracted. And I mean, I don't know, depending on the magnitude of those adjustments, that actually sounds like solid advice to me. Like, you should be aware of
Hmm.
what your listener is doing. Like, does your listener look bored? Maybe that's because you're being fucking boring, like it doesn't seem like bad advice. It's just about like how much you actually change based on that. If it's just like tiny adjustments, that sounds like an absolute reasonable thing for me.
Maybe. It depends on what genre it is. I'm just saying that, like, if it's a stand up, maybe is a good advice. If it's just storytellers in terms of, like, you just create a world with your words, and that seems like not worth it to change it just because someone was a little bored. I don't know.
Yeah, anyway, so the twink says that when he was younger, he would just close his eyes and really immerse himself in the story, not caring about whether anyone else liked it, only that he did. Which is, okay, a nice place to start, where there seems to be this implication that this is kind of the ideal that he needs to return to, which I don't know, that doesn't sound reasonable to me.
Mm.
Like, you need someone else to like your story. Like, if you're gonna perform it for other people, and you're the only one who likes it. That's kind of a problem.
Fair.
Yeah. So that being said, Gabrielle says that, oh, but if you don't like your story, nobody else will, and that is fair. I am on board with that. I do believe that if you're bored by what you're creating, others will experience that boredom as they consume that thing. So if you're excited and interested as the creator, it's more likely that the audience will feel that as well.
Totally, and that's actually the first thing that Gabby says, and I can agree with.
So at that point, Gabrielle and the twink are talking, and the reception desk lady comes up and tells Gabrielle that they need to speak. So it's clear that the jig is up. We see Gabrielle then stand in front of the lady and the man who was not actually stabbed, and they say that they know that she wasn't registered, and it was the daddy who told them. They tell Gabrielle, well, after all this, you must leave. Back in Gabrielle's room, all her bard buddies are sad, and one of them says that goodbyes are hard, which of course leads to yet another flashback to Gabrielle meeting Iolaus.
Gabrielle just cannot get enough of the attention she gets from those dudes when she's telling those stories.
Mhm.
Before Gabrielle starts to tell the story, Euripides tries to make some sort of Greek tragedy statement about blah 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 and blah blah blah, and like his buddy who's stuttering, who is this nicest guy out of them all, it seems, he says, "No, I'm just saying goodbyes are hard."
Aw.
It's like a cute moment.
It is, it is. So at that point, one of the bards gets an idea. They discuss it amongst themselves and they ask Gabrielle to stay for the competition, not explaining what their idea was. So the next day, we see Gabrielle come into the audience and the daddy notices her disapprovingly. So the first person, the stuttering guy, is invited onto the stage, but he just stands there, doesn't say anything. The judges ask whether something is wrong, and he tells them that he and some others actually are refusing to participate in the competition unless Gabrielle is reinstated. My problem with that is that there are like, what, four of them? And the competition is significantly larger. Like, they can just easily be disqualified, and the competition wouldn't lose that significant a portion of the contestants. Anyway, the jury seems intrigued, so Gabrielle is told to get onto the stage. And as for competition story, Gabrielle goes with episode 4, Cradle of Hope, featuring the ping pong baby.
Yep.
Which is by far the worst episode of the series so far. Like, at the end of each episode that we record, we give a certain number of chakrams out of 10 to like rate the episode, and we've been giving most episodes 7s and 8s and 9s out of 10, and that one was a unanimous 2
because it was bad.
That's how bad that episode was. And this is what Gabrielle picks. Okay. Anyway, the plot again demands that the jury is impressed, so they are. And one of them even says that art will never be slave to rules and regulations.
Yep.
It was especially funny for me to hear that phrase in the episode because that day I also watched a video about the history of blacklists and union busting in Hollywood. And it's like, no, sometimes art will definitely be slave to rules and regulations.
Definitely, like, in it seems like that's a universal thing throughout the times. But yeah, I also find it funny that Gabrielle chose the absolute worst episode to retell. But on the other hand, there's a baby in it, so the stakes are high, I guess.
Sure.
And then we threw that baby up in the air, and then it didn't die. Surprise! I was surprised when I was watching the episode that this kid didn't die.
Yeah, that's fair. So we jump forward in time a bit to the very end of the Twinks performance. And as he steps backstage, he's praised by his fellow competitors, but the daddy tells him that it was terrible. And he demands that the Twinks start telling the story again immediately. Like, he just got off the stage. He's like, nope, redo it right now. So the twink has this like moment of kind of chuckling in disbelief for a second, and then he's like, "Oh, I guess I have no choice here." So he gives up, starts telling the story again, and he briefly glances to his friends as he does, and the daddy interrupts him, tells him to keep the eyes on him, smacks him on the forehead, tells him to restart. So the twink restarts, but the daddy then has yet another criticism, then another, until the twink snaps and runs away. Yeah. We then cut to another clip for a movie, and it's a peplum,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a lizard man in it. No idea what's happening. Like, what the hell?
I don't know what's going on, but I would gladly see that film. That seems like a great category B movie.
Yeah, yeah. So in that movie, the lizard man fights a man, and it's clear from the narration style that it's our action bard Stallone's. And this time he gets so into it that he falls from the top bunk bed. Gabrielle, in her signature harsh style, tells the guy that if he adds some character stuff, he has a chance to live through the competition. Um, wow.
Thanks, Gabrielle.
Yeah. So it seems that the competition is not over because at first it wasn't clear that there were multiple rounds. We just saw one round and there was going to be another one. So the daddy walks in and tells Gabrielle that it seems that she has won because Orion has quit the competition and left for home. And so he uses the name Orion, which, like, I understand that the Twink's original name is being kept secret for the sake of the big reveal at the end, but I just find it really weird that a name that Gabrielle kind of threw in as a random suggestions a couple of days ago has become so fully established that his own father uses it. Like, come on, no.
No, no, it doesn't seem that this guy would be the guy where like you come up to him and say, "Daddy,
Yeah.
my name is Orion now. Could you call me that, please?" He would just smack you on the head. He would
Yeah.
not do it. And it would be very easily avoidable if he would just say "my son," and that's it.
Absolutely. So that's a weird decision on the part of the screenwriters. So Gabrielle runs after the twink and she tries to persuade him to go back to the competition. And the twink says that it's not fun anymore for him, so he doesn't want to do it. To which Gabrielle answers that maybe he should try to make it fun again, which is fair. What is not fair is that she also tells him that his father loves him. What evidence of that has she seen? Like, everything that we have seen with that character tells us that he's an absolute crap father, and nothing tells us that he loves the guy.
No, no, he's just using his son to, I don't know, like become the father of this established bard, I guess. I don't know. He is a pageant mom through and through.
Yeah, he really is. Anyway, the twink says that he doesn't even know how to tell his own stories. So Gabrielle just tells him to focus on the journey, not the destination. And the twink is convinced, so he goes back but tells the daddy that he will do it his own way. So we cut to Gabrielle performing in the final, and she tells everyone that she and Xena became friends. That's it. That's the story. That, like, there's literally nothing else in it. We get some flashbacks from episode 2, Chariots of War, featuring Porno Dad. But the narration is just full on generic. We met and we went on adventures stuff. Like, that's it. And the jury is in tears. They're literally crying. Like, clearly it's a triumph.
We just have to accept that.
Yeah. So then it's the twink's turn. And he chooses to tell the story of Spartacus. So we literally see clips from the movie Spartacus with Kirk Douglas.
That's awesome. And I mean that makes sense because everybody else just had those snippets of those, I guess, less popular peplums. And here we have this big iconic movie and we have to establish somehow that this character actually is special and his stories once he gets rid of the daddy are actually very good. So that is what I'm saying. Like, that's a very clear and concise way to do it. So that was cool.
For sure. If only they did it for the rest of it.
Well, they cannot do it for Gabrielle,
Nope.
unfortunately.
No. So in the end, interestingly enough, it seems like Gabrielle doesn't get in because she talks to the twink, and clearly the context of the conversation is that he's going to go to the academy and she isn't.
Mm-hmm.
And the twink gives her a chaste little peck on the cheek, which is very cute, and thanks Gabrielle for helping him find a way to be himself. Gabrielle finally pushes the twink to reveal his original name, and we finally find out that it's Homer.
2 points here. First, he had this story of closing his eyes and then just telling a story. And we know that Homer has been called the blind bard, but we don't know exactly why. Like, was he really blind or was that a nickname?
Mm-mm.
And they say in this episode that, like, they're calling him the blind bard now because he closes his eyes and then he just starts telling the story, which is a nice touch. The third, like the second point is that it's interesting in terms of the order of the episodes that we just saw Helen of Troy and the story of Iliad.
Mm.
That is going to be the story that Homer tells and makes super famous.
Mm-mm.
And then we see the origin story of Homer himself, which is kind of cool. And the third point, that it's not a surprise to anyone by now, but just because I want to, I will throw in that there is a 400-year difference between Euripides and Homer. But who cares?
Oh well. Details.
Yeah.
So after that, we cut to Xena walking along a path with Argo, and Gabrielle joins her. And weirdly, Xena doesn't look surprised. She doesn't look happy, which is a bit strange given how she was fairly certain that she wouldn't see Gabrielle for years at that point.
I think it's just Xena being Xena, not showing proper emotions again.
Yeah. Gabrielle then reveals that she actually won the competition, but she decided that she would rather live the life of adventures instead of talking about them. And lo and behold, they immediately run into a gang of baddies. And Gabrielle is excited to see them and says that it would make a great story. But why, Gabrielle? I personally feel like that story would be exciting but empty.
Yeah, no moral. Although I'm sure that she would put in something cheesy at the end of it just for the heck of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the episode, and the funny titles at the end say additional thanks to Steve Reeves. And I looked him up, and he's an American professional bodybuilder and actor who, from the stills that I see on his IMDb page, has starred in those peplums that they showed. Like, I think that he was fighting the lizard. He was the man who was fighting the lizard man. So, yeah, and he was alive at the time that this episode aired. So, I wonder maybe he just gave permission to use his archive or something.
Yeah.
That would be cool. Like, he was born in 1926. He was pretty old then, but
All right. So, how many chakrams out of 10 would you give this episode?
So I know it's flawed, but in terms of attention to detail and the fact that it's really creative in terms of how the episode handles all the storytelling, a 9.
Oh my god. Oh my
A
god.
9. For me, it's a 9.
Holy shit, girl.
I was contemplating a 10,
What the
but
fuck?
but there are some issues, so a 9.
Jesus Christ. I am shocked.
Okay, how much you would give this episode?
A 4.
A 4?
A 4.
A 4?
A
It's
4.
so funny. It's so creative. It
No.
notices those little details about life, like the receptionist who wants to get rid of you.
Oh my god, the receptionist. Yes, it's a 10.
I mean, it's fair. I think that I love it so much because that's very much the environment that I know and that they captured well. So, fair.
Anyway, that concludes our review of episode 13, and we'll be back soon to discuss episode 14 called A Fistful of Dinars.
All right. Bye.
Bye!